There once lived an old farmer in a dusty village, far from the noise of the world. His hands were cracked from years of toil, and his back curved like the sickle he used every day. "What has all this hard work brought me?" he asked aloud. The ant stumbled over a stone, and the crumb fell. The farmer watched, expecting it to give up, but the ant didn't. It turned back, lifted the crumb again, and walked on. Another bump, another fall. The crumb slipped again and again, 5 times, 6 times, but the ant never once stopped. No cries, no complaints, just a quiet persistence. He picked up his tools, stood straight, and smiled faintly, not because the burden had disappeared, but because he had decided to carry it differently. The old farmer no longer cursed the sun or sighed at the wind. He worked with quiet strength. He began sharing his food with others, even when he had little. And strangely, the rains returned. Slowly, the soil softened. The crops began to grow again, not just in his land, but in his heart, a steady determination. And those 5 words carried more wisdom than books ever could. No rain, no crops, no luck. It never asked, "Why me?" It simply walked forward, one step at a time. And sometimes, that's all you need to change everything. As he leaned back and stared blankly at the ground, his eyes caught something tiny moving across the dry soil, a single ant. Small, barely visible, carrying a large crumb of wheat many times its size. Life had not been kind. His crops barely grew, his animals had grown thin, and his hope had nearly disappeared. Every morning, he would wake up, sigh deeply, and mutter, "Why me? Why must I suffer this much?" The air around him had grown as heavy as his heart. One blistering afternoon, he sat under a wilting tree, his straw hat covering his face, and his soul soaked in bitterness. At first, he scoffed. "Even the ants are mocking me with their effort," he grumbled. But something made him pause. The farmer found himself leaning in, eyes fixed. "Why doesn't it give up?" he whispered. No one clapped for it. No reward waited at the end. And yet, it moved with purpose. Then, finally, after many tries, the ant reached the entrance of its tiny anthill. Then, without warning, a tear escaped the corner of his eye, not out of sadness but realization. If an ant can keep going without complaining, he whispered, "What excuse do I have?" It vanished inside, crumb in tow, like nothing had happened. A strange silence filled the farmer's chest. He had spent months groaning at life's weight, but this creature so small, so powerless, carried its burden with grace. He sat there longer than he intended, lost in thought. That evening, he walked back to his fields. The crops were still dry, the sky still empty, but something in him had changed. From that day forward, the villagers noticed a change. When people asked what had changed, he simply said, "I learned from an ant." So the next time life feels unfair, when your shoulders droop and your heart aches, remember that ant, because strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet steps of the smallest soul that carry the biggest lessons.